Number 1. Lori Vallow Davey. The religious delusion Lori Vallow Daybell's case is perhaps the most shocking cult-related crime of the 21st century. Lori claimed she was a godlike figure chosen to lead 144,000 people before the apocalypse. In this obsession, she declared her own children, Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow, to be zombies, claiming their souls had been replaced by dark spirits and that killing them was a mercy. Lori Vallow's story is that of a mother who erased maternal instinct to embrace a lethal religious mania. Initially, she appeared to be a devoted suburban mother, but after meeting Chad Daybell, her reality fractured. Together, they created a light and dark rating system where anyone who opposed them was labeled dark, meaning they were possessed by demonic spirits. Tragically, her own innocent children were at the top of that list. When Tylee and JJ vanished in September 2019, Lori showed no grief. Instead, she was photographed smiling on a beach in Hawaii, marrying Chad while her children lay in shallow graves on a remote Idaho farm. When investigators and the media questioned her, she simply offered a cold, detached smirk. The world watched in horror as it became clear that this mother was stone-cold enough to celebrate while her children were rotting in the dirt. In court, the evidence was devastating. Forensic teams revealed the brutal nature of the children's deaths. Lori was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, she has expressed no remorse. She remains an evil woman who committed the most unholy acts in the name of God. The trail of Death Lori's crimes extended far beyond her children. Her path was littered with the bodies of the men in her life. She manipulated her brother, Alex Cox, into shooting her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, under the guise of self-defense. Shortly after, Chad Daybell's first wife, Tammy, died mysteriously, clearing the way for the cult leaders to Wednesday. Months before his death, Charles Vallow desperately warned police that Lori had threatened to kill him, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Lori eventually incited her brother to kill Charles, staging a self-defense drama. Following the shooting, Lori didn't mourn. She hosted a pool party that very afternoon. This was the first major evidence of a sociopathic nature that viewed human life as entirely disposable. Tammy Daybell's death was initially ruled natural, but later exhumations revealed she had been asphyxiated. Lori and Chad systematically removed every obstacle in their path, framing these murders as spiritual cleansing. Lori acted as the mastermind, weaving a web of lies and manipulation to keep their killing spree hidden for months. As her life sentence was read, Lori remained unmoved. She proved that she wasn't just a killer, but a predatory manipulator who turned death into a personal business. Prison records show she still views herself as a victim or a chosen one. This case demonstrates how a beautiful face can mask a truly terrifying and predatory mind. The cold reality of prison today: Lori Vallow spends her days in an Idaho maximum security facility. Prison staff report that she keeps herself isolated and continues to speak of doomsday prophecies. This section explores her life behind bars and the psychological research that distinguishes between a person who is legally insane and a person who is truly evil. Behind prison walls, Lori is no longer the pageant queen. She has lost her followers and the luxury she tried to build on a foundation of blood. In jail, she appears to live in a world of her own making. Psychiatrists suggest Lori suffers from extreme narcissism, where only her own desires matter, even if it requires the slaughter of those she claimed to love. Lori Vallow's name is now synonymous with America's most dangerous women. Her permanent residence on the prison list proves that the law eventually catches up to those who hide behind religious masks. She is kept under tight surveillance because of her manipulative nature, as she reportedly tries to recruit other inmates into her delusional belief system. This story ends in a dark cell where Lori will spend the rest of her natural life. While Tylee and JJ can never have their lives back, Lori's life sentence ensures she can never harm another innocent person. Lori Vallow Daybell remains a dark chapter in true crime history, a warning that the most dangerous monsters are often tea. Number 2. Janine Jones. The pediatric killer Janine Jones was a nurse working in Texas during the 1980s. Known as the Angel of Death, she is suspected of killing over 60 infants and young children. Her method was the ultimate betrayal. She would give babies overdoses of heart medication like digoxin to induce a medical crisis, then attempt to save them to be hailed as a hero by the doctors. When infant mortality rates spiked at a San Antonio hospital in the early 80s, no one initially suspected nurse Janine Jones. She was known as a tireless worker who excelled in emergencies. However, the truth was far more sinister. She was the one causing the emergencies. She would inject poison into the veins of defenseless babies just to watch the hospital descend into chaos so she could become the center of attention. Babies who were on the verge of going home would suddenly stop breathing. Janine would cry alongside the grieving mothers, a performance that masked her true role as their executioner. She traded the lives of children for a professional adrenaline rush. She was an evil woman who used a nurse's uniform to conduct a campaign of murder. When the hospital administration grew suspicious, they chose to protect their reputation rather than call the police, asking Janine to resign instead. This systemic failure allowed her to move to another clinic in Kerrville, Texas, where she immediately began killing again. Her final victim, 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan, died after Janine gave her a lethal injection. Jones forever tarnished the sacred profession of nursing. The institutional cover-up. What makes the Janine Jones case truly infuriating is the cover-up by hospital officials. They shredded pharmacy records and nursing logs to avoid malpractice lawsuits. This section explores how systemic negligence allowed a serial killer to continue her spree for years. Janine Jones was difficult to catch because the evidence against her was intentionally destroyed. Hospital administrators were more concerned with liability than with the lives of their patients. Consequently, Janine was initially convicted of only one murder. Due to a legal loophole in Texas known as mandatory release, she was scheduled to go free in 2018, causing a wave of terror across the state. To prevent her release, prosecutors reopened cold cases from 35 years ago. They tracked down mothers who had spent decades wondering why their healthy babies had suddenly died. Through forensic archaeology and persistent investigation, they built a new case. It was a race against time, and in 2020, new charges were finally brought against her. Janine was handed a new life sentence. In the courtroom, parents who had carried their grief for over 3 decades finally found a measure of peace. Janine's case is now a staple in medical ethics classes, serving as a grim reminder of how a caregiver can become a cold-blooded killer. The profile of a sadist Janine Jones suffered from a professional version of Munchausen by proxy. She was addicted to the power of making others ill just to rescue them. This section looks at her current life in prison and the psychological reports that insist she must never be released. In prison, Janine's personality has remained highly aggressive. She still views herself as a superior nurse and blames the deaths on bad luck or the mistakes of doctors. Psychologists label her a power-hungry sadist who thrives on the suffering of others. Even in a controlled environment, she attempts to manipulate those around her to maintain a sense of control. Her life sentence was a necessity. If released, she would almost certainly seek out another vulnerable person to target. Today, she lives out her final days in a Texas prison unit, isolated and alone, a fitting end for a woman who emptied so many cribs. Her name sits on the prison list with a no parole tag, a victory for justice. The legacy of Janine Jones is a lesson that evil can wear any face. A stethoscope is not always a sign of safety. For the lives she stole, the only appropriate punishment was to spend her own life behind bars. The memory of Chelsea McClellan and the dozens of other infants ensures that Janine Jones will never be forgotten as a monster in white. Number 3. Anna Young. The cult of torture. Anna Young was the leader of the House of Prayer cult in Florida. Claiming to be a messenger of God, she ruled with a terrifying hand. She subjected members and their children to starvation and bleach baths to cleanse their souls. Her cruelty peaked when she starved 2-year-old Emmon Harper to death. Anna Young used religion as a weapon for torture. Her house of prayer was not a place of worship, but a house of horrors. She demanded absolute purity, which she enforced through brutal beatings with extension cords. Little Emmon, whom she mockingly called Moses, became her primary target because he cried. She locked the toddler in a dark room and withheld all food and water until his body gave out. When the child died, Anna showed no remorse. She told cult members that God had taken him and then burned his body in a bonfire to hide the evidence. For 20 years, she lived as a fugitive from her own past, eventually moving to Georgia where she lived as a seemingly sweet grandma. Her neighbors saw a pious old woman, never suspecting that her hands were stained with the blood of children. The secret finally unraveled in 2017 when Anna's own daughter, Joy Fluker, contacted the police. Joy could no longer carry the weight of what she had seen. When police arrived at the 75-year-old woman's home, they found it hard to believe that this frail grandmother was a cold-blooded cult executioner. Decades of silence. Anna Young evaded justice for over 2 decades by blending into society. This section explores her arrest and the testimonies of her victims, who describe how she turned their childhoods into a living nightmare. Anna Young's trial was a haunting confrontation with the past. Adult survivors, now in their 40s and 50s, stood in court and trembled as they faced her. They spoke of bleach baths that burned their skin and weeks spent locked in closets without food. To them, Anna was not a woman of God, but a living demon who had stolen their innocence. Anna tried to play the role of a frail, elderly woman in court, but her daughter's recorded confessions prove her guilt. She had admitted to the punishment that led to the child's death. This betrayal of the daughter was the only way the truth could finally surface. A woman who taught her children to hide murder was eventually brought down by her own blood. In 2021, at the age of 79, Anna was sentenced to life in prison. The judge noted that she had desecrated the concept of faith. Anna Young proved that serial killers aren't always young or male. A grandmother's face can hide the most depraved sadism. The psychopathy of a cult leader Anna Young's psychology was rooted in sadistic control. She gained power through the administration of pain. This section details her life in prison and her eventual death behind bars, which served as a final reckoning for her crimes. Life in prison was a harsh reality for the elderly Anna Young. Her body was failing, but her mind remained sharp and hostile. She reportedly cursed the guards and maintained her innocence until the end. Psychologists noted that she never felt an ounce of guilt. To her, the torture was simply discipline. She was an evil woman who believed her own delusions of godhood. Anna's name was permanently etched into the prison list. She spent her final years in a cell, experiencing the same isolation she once forced upon Emmon Harper. She passed away in prison shortly after her conviction, bringing an end to the dark legacy of the House of Prayer. However, the scars on her victims will remain forever. Her story is a warning about the dangers of extreme isolation and charismatic leaders. Anna Young thought she could outrun her sins, but the smoke from that bonfire eventually led the law back to her door. Her life sentence was not just a punishment. It was a final validation for the survivors of her house of horrors. Number 4. Melissa Ann Shepard. The serial marriage killer Melissa Ann Shepard is known as the Internet Black Widow. She targeted lonely, elderly men through dating sites, married them, and then slowly poisoned them to inherit their estates. Her criminal career spanned over 60 years across North America. Looking at Melissa Ann Shepard, you would see a sweet, white-haired grandmother. But behind that mask was a predator who viewed men as walking bank accounts. Her method was consistent: find a widower, move in within days, and start the slow fade. She used heavy sedatives and blood thinners to make her husband's deaths appear like natural geriatric decline. In 1991, she killed her second husband by drugging him and running him over with a car. Despite the brutality, she served only a short sentence before returning to the hunt. She moved from target to target, using Christian dating sites to find men who were too lonely to be suspicious. Melissa turned the concept of love into a lethal trap. Her target selection was cold and calculated. She knew that the death of an elderly man rarely triggers a murder investigation. She relied on the geriatric cover to hide her crimes. She is an evil woman who used the stereotypes of old age to shield her from the consequences of multiple murders. The final mistake Melissa's spree ended when she married 75-year-old Fred Weeks. This section explores how her greed finally led to her downfall when a sharp-eyed doctor recognized her Black Widow profile. Fred Weeks was a lonely widower who thought he had found love again. However, on their honeymoon, his health began to plummet. He became disoriented and suffered frequent falls. Melissa played the devoted wife at the hospital, but her act failed when doctors found unprescribed drugs in Fred's blood. When the medical staff checked her background, they were horrified to find a serial killer in their ward. The Black Widow was finally caught. Police found a pharmacy of stolen pills in her bag. This was the first time one of her victims had survived to testify against her. Fred spoke of how sweet Melissa had systematically drugged him to steal his life savings. The grandmother mask was gone, revealing a career criminal. Melissa was given a long sentence and placed under the strictest monitoring orders in Canadian history. She is the first woman in the country to be labelled a long-term offender even in her 80s, because the government knows that if left unsupervised, she will find another victim. She proves that lethality has no expiration date. Profile of a Financial Predator. Melissa Shepard's psychology is a study in financial sociopathy. She felt no connection to her husbands. They were simply obstacles to their own money. This section analyzes her life under supervision and why she remains on the most feared list. Today, Melissa lives her life under constant surveillance. She is prohibited from using the internet and cannot enter into relationships with men. Prison and parole records show she still tries to manipulate her handlers, playing the role of a frail old woman to gain sympathy. She is a woman who consumes people for profit. Her story is a warning for the digital age. Trust, but verify. She used the anonymity of the internet to find targets when no one knew her criminal history. She is the evil woman you might meet at a church social, a reminder that the most dangerous person is the one who knows exactly how to say I love you while they are killing you. Number 5. Nanny Doss. The serial poisoner Nanny Doss, famously known as the Giggling Granny, murdered 11 people between the 1920s and 1950s, including 4 husbands, her mother, and her own children. She used arsenic mixed into their food. She earned her nickname because she would giggle and tell jokes while describing the deaths of her loved ones. Behind Nanny Doss's cheerful smile was a terrifying void of empathy. She married men and, when she grew bored or wanted insurance money, she fed them arsenic. She didn't stop at husbands. She killed her own mother and sisters as well. For Nanny, human life had no value. She would kill a spouse and immediately start reading true romance magazines to find her next victim. Police failed to catch her for decades because no one suspected a happy woman of such atrocities. It wasn't until her 5th husband died and a suspicious doctor performed an autopsy that the truth came out. His body was filled with enough arsenic to kill a dozen men. When arrested, Nanny was found laughing and telling jokes at the police station. She admitted she killed her husbands because she was looking for the perfect romantic life. She is an evil woman who destroyed entire families for a fantasy. Her giggling was the sign of a classic psychopath who viewed the suffering of others as a joke. Nanny Doss proved that a laugh could be as lethal as a gun. The family massacre Nanny Doss's cruelty wasn't limited to her husbands. She targeted her own blood. This section analyzes the murders of her children and mother, showing the absolute lack of maternal or familial bond. Nanny's evil began at home. She poisoned 2 of her daughters to collect insurance money. She even killed her own mother when the elderly woman moved in with her. Perhaps her most heinous act was killing her newborn grandchild by stabbing a pin into the baby's brain. This level of depravity is rare even among the most notorious serial killers. In court, the details of her crimes horrified the public. The woman everyone called Sweet Nanny was revealed to be a monster. She never showed grief, only interest in when she could get back to her romance stories. Nanny Doss proved that evil can be patient, lurking in the kitchen and the family dinner table for years. She was sentenced to life in prison. While many called for the death penalty, her strange behavior led some to believe she was mentally ill. However, her planning was too meticulous for insanity. She was simply a woman with a blackened soul who killed because she could. The legacy of the giggling granny Nanny Doss spent the rest of her life in prison, dying of leukemia in 1965. This section explores her life behind bars and her dark legacy in forensic science. In prison, Nanny Doss remained a strange figure. She wanted to work in the prison kitchen, but authorities refused, fearing she would poison the other inmates. She spent her days reading and laughing, never expressing a moment of regret for the families she wiped out. Her laughter remained a chilling soundtrack to her incarceration. Today, Nanny Doss is a primary example of a female serial killer. Her case forced forensic science to develop better ways to detect household poisons. She shattered the myth that women only kill for protection. She killed for pleasure and profit. Her life sentence was the only way to ensure the giggling granny would never kill again. Nanny Doss's story remains a warning. Happiness can be a mask. She was a true crime shocker who proved that the person serving you dinner might be planning your funeral. She died as she lived, with a smile on her face and the blood of her family on her hands.